Welcome back to the channel. I am Commander TYrael and this is IJN Myoko. The Myoko-Class cruisers, or the Nachi-Class depending on who you ask, were a series of 4 heavy cruisers built for the Imperial Japanese Navy in the late 1920s. Of the ships, Myoko, Nachi, Haguro, and Ashigara, 3 were lost during World War II. In this video, I'll explain a little of their history and then show you how you can use the mean and mighty Myoko, which appears in the game as a 5.7 battle rating premium cruiser, and in her final 1944 configuration. The Imperial Japanese heavy cruiser IJN Myoko was laid down at the Yokosuka Naval Arsenal on the 25th of October 1924. She was launched and christened Myoko after Myoko-shi, an old city located in the Niigata prefecture. The launching ceremony was attended by Emperor Hirohito. She was commissioned on the 31st of July 1929 under the command of Captain Fujisawa Takuo. First ship in her class to be laid down and launched, she was the third to be completed, which is why authors are divided on the name of the class. IJN Nachi was the first. She fought valiantly throughout the war and managed to survive to the very end. This class was approved under the 1922 to 1929 Fleet Modernization program, and they were really the first true heavy cruisers built within the design constraints of the Washington Naval Treaty, and even the first 10,000-ton cruisers built by any nation of the time. Their wartime records are impressive, and they were involved in virtually all battles of the Pacific War and managed to survive through till 1944 and 1945. The ships of the class displaced 11,633 tons and were 201 meters long. They were capable of steaming at 36 knots or 67 kilometers per hour. Their main armament was 10 20cm third-year type naval guns in 5 twin turrets, which were complemented by a heavy torpedo armament. At this time, this was the heaviest armament of any cruiser class in the world. The class was modernized twice before the outbreak of the Pacific War, and the first modernization program was carried out in 1934. This one was the most extensive. The main armament was upgraded to 203mm 2GO version guns, and 120mm guns were replaced with 8 12.7mm Type 89 dual-purpose guns in twin mounts. The single catapult was replaced with an aircraft deck that could accommodate 3 aircraft and 2 catapults. The fixed torpedo tubes in the hull were removed, and 2 quadruple launchers carrying the Type 93 Long Lance torpedo were installed. The torpedo bulges were also extended to increase stability. The modifications added 680 tons of displacement and reduced the speed to 34 knots or 63 kilometers per hour. The second modernization in 1939 added an additional 2 quadruple torpedo launchers and enhanced light anti-aircraft armament with the introduction of the Type 96 25mm gun. The aircraft catapults were upgraded to handle heavier float planes, and the torpedo bulges were enlarged to increase stability. The class received upgrades that reflected the growing threat of aircraft in their numerous forms. Type 96 25mm scattered all over the ship, and an air and surface search radar were added. Myoko eventually received a total of 52 25mm autocannons in various single, double and triple mounts. The 2 aft quadruple torpedo mounts were removed in 1944 to allow for the growing number of anti-aircraft guns. Myoko's final action was the Battle of Leyte Gulf as part of Vice Admiral Kurita's 1st Mobile Strike Force, also known as the Center Force. As Center Force tried to force a passage through the Sibian Sea, they were spotted and attacked by the famous US Task Force 38. Although most of the airstrikes concentrated on the Battle Musashi, the Myoko was hit by a torpedo aft on the starboard side. The hit damaged her starboard screws, forcing Myoko to break off and head for Singapore at a reduced speed of 15 knots. After temporary repairs, she departed for Japan. Underway on the 13th of December 1944, Myoko was hit by 1 torpedo from a spread of 6, fired by the submarine USS Bergall. Myoko was hit on the aft port side, blowing away her stern and leaving her unable to steer, dead in the water. Despite the extensive damage, 1 port screw was operable, and she could make 6 knots. Her escort, the destroyer Ushio, managed to score a lucky hit on USS Bergall, forcing the sub to make a perilous return to Fremantle for repairs. Ushio was able to tow Myoko to Singapore Harbour. In February of 1945, Harbour Commander reported that the Myoko was irreparable at Singapore without more materials, and impossible to tow to Japan. He recommended that Myoko be kept in Singapore as a floating AA battery. This suggestion was approved, and although targeted by British midget submarines, she survived the war. She formally surrendered to British units on September 21. IJN Myoko was later towed to the Straits of Malacca and scuttled near the submarines I-501 and I-502. Now that the history lesson is over, we'll have a quick look at the main features of the ship in-game. The first thing players will notice is a significant increase in armor protection compared to the preceding Furutaka or Aoba class. With a 4-inch belt extending almost the entire length of the ship and 3-inch armor protection over the 4 turrets. The ship features 1.3 inches of deck armor, which is serviceable against light guns at range. The barbettes are 3 inches thick, with the turrets lightly armored containing only 25mm of protection. This is common to all Japanese ships and remains a consistent weakness across their cruiser line. In an attempt to minimize top weight, the bridge was unarmored, and this presents another threat to the ship's survivability. The ship has a large ammo store in the bow, and fortunately this is placed fairly low in the waterline and has decent protection from detonation. The fire control system sits abaft the magazine. As such, the ship rarely loses its fire control system, and when it does, the magazine usually goes too. The main 4-inch belt protects the rear ammo stores, increasing survivability in this section. A, B, C and Z turrets have excellent fire angles, mainly due to their positioning and the length of the ship. The Y turret is blocked by the aircraft deck, but I'll illustrate this in a moment. By taking these factors into consideration, we can see that the angle that provides the best protection is to have the enemy in your stern quarter. This maximizes armor protection all around and keeps the fore magazine well covered. There aren't many battles in WarThunder that involve a stern chase, but you can maneuver the ship along certain attack lines to take advantage of this. Most Japanese ships excel in this style of fight, and this is due to the doctrine that they were designed under, the Kantai Kasen, or Decisive Battle Doctrine. See the link to that video in the comments. In this clip you can see that the ship's targeting about 35 degrees off the bow, and we're still able to get the rear turret on to target. This means you can take pretty aggressive angles towards the enemy or away from them and still have maximum firepower. I think the closest premium ship you could compare this to would be the Admiral Hipper or the Prince Eugen. I would say that this ship is better in some metrics, and the Prince Eugen is a little bit better in others. To get the 5th turret onto target, you need to hit about 45 degrees or maybe 50 degrees off the bow. It's not the best premium ship, but it certainly is very powerful, and it offers a great diversity and different styles of gameplay. Now we'll have a look at some clips and I'll show you the different things that you can do in this ship. The biggest threat to your survivability obviously is the long lance torpedoes, but they're also the biggest threat to the enemy's survivability. So in these closed waters maps where you're at fairly close range, the enemy doesn't have many places to go, get the long lances out as quickly as possible and change directions. You can do this quickly by looking the other direction and holding the C key, and this will lock your turrets into looking into that direction. This maneuver in the Myoko takes about 1 minute to complete, changing directions, swinging the turrets around, and getting the long lances on their second spread. If you do this every match, you're usually guaranteed to get 1 or 2 cruiser kills, always prioritizing cruisers with your torpedo spreads rather than destroyers. In these maps where the cruisers all spawn in one place and are heading to the same direction, it's exceedingly easy to get torpedo kills. So we're completing that maneuver I just explained to you, and we've managed to get 1 kill off our first spread. And a second kill from the first spread. And we still have another 8 long lances left. The 8-inch guns on the Myoko are extremely powerful, just like all of the Japanese ships, and they can easily detonate a Cleveland or an American cruiser through the barbettes at close range. About 7 kilometers this starts to be able to happen. The Japanese guns are very good at long range as well. If you keep your enemy at about 11 kilometers, you can take advantage of the plunging fire and usually get into the magazines of a Cleveland. The reload is on par with the Admiral Hipper or the Prince Eugen. They have a little bit less penetration, a little bit less explosive filler, but it makes up for that with a long fuse time. There's not much difference between this and the German shells. Having 10 guns gives you quite the devastating broadside. So you start as a backline cruiser and then you become the tip of the spear. Quite profitable, most matches will earn you approximately 100,000. Myoko's scout plane is more of a fighter than a bomber, as it hasn't got a secondary loadout, but it is very fast. So use it to have a look where the enemy's coming from. In this battle, I avoided combat for the first stages. I used my scout plane to see where everyone was heading, and then I set myself up for a torpedo ambush. Sending the torpedoes from an unexpected direction pays off more often than not. And it also puts you in a good gunnery position to fight the enemies that might be engaged with your allies. If you have a look at the mini-map here, we're moving up in a solid line, and I am on the flanks. Using ripple fire in the Myoko is extremely effective with the 10 guns. By the time the first salvo hits, your first gun is usually ready for firing again, especially at long range, so this makes your shots extremely accurate over time. It does minimize your alpha strike capacity, but damaging the enemy consistently often pays off more than alpha strike. Japanese cruisers often work better in ambush situations with their heavy hitting guns and their torpedoes. The long fuse on the armor-piercing shell makes bow-in engagements quite a fickle affair. You'll often detonate through the front of a Cleveland if you get within that 7-kilometer penetration mark. And when they turn, you just hit them in the back turrets. Detonating those ready rack rooms puts a lot of pressure on the ship. It's the single best way to kill those ships because it creates a fire event, a flooding event, and it destroys all of the ammunition in the ready room, slowing down their reloads somewhat. Being sneaky on an encounter map means you can get through to the back line, torpedo all the NPC ships, and harvest some of those good old silver lions. I almost exclusively use the armor-piercing shells because I just find them to be amazing. I'll only use the high explosive in an absolute dire situation, or if I have to take out a certain turret on a destroyer. Now, direct engagements with the 6-inch US cruisers at this range is not a smart idea. They will chew through you like any other ship. But despite that, we've made another 100,000. And we've also collected 2,000 souls for the Emperor. Kampai! I really hope the ship stays at 5.7 battle rating because often you get these battles where you can just lob 8-inch armor-piercing shells at lone US destroyers, and I know you know the one I'm talking about, the Moffats. And it's just a harvesting affair. 35,000 for 2 volleys of 8-inch shells. Thank you very much. Now, fighting the Prince Eugen can be interesting. Sometimes you pop them like a balloon, and other times they just will refuse to die. If he focuses you, he will clap you. Simply because his armor layout is better. Oh, there's another Moffat. Everywhere you fire, Moffats pop. And here is an example of that. The previous Prince Eugen took about 10 volleys to kill and I only got an assist. This guy, fire 1 at him unranged and he will pop like a balloon. He may have already had low health, but you see my point. Oh, I forgot to mention, if you use a booster, you will earn about 500,000. So what about the much maligned open water maps? Well, I can tell you that the strategy doesn't change too much. Get those long lances out quickly, but stay behind your allies. Put your allies between you and them. This will give you a very good time because you can just pick off all the ships that you want. And you'll also get to experience long-range gunnery and be able to see how effective the Japanese shells can be if you can put them where they need to be. And you'll also get those complementary long-lance kills. Now, long-range duels with Clevelands are fun, but keep moving because they will still do damage to you. If you take your time and range them in properly, you will win the fights. Marginally. But, like all Japanese destroyers and cruisers, you cannot react very well to surprise. So always be the one that's doing the ambush. And you'll still make about 100,000. Now, the float plane is your key element. Use it as often as you can and try to experiment with its different uses. Capturing a point, you will get the premium bonuses with this cruiser, and so capturing will give you an easy 15,000. And then you just leave them to their fate. Oh, it's also fun to try and use it as a kamikaze bomber against US PT boats. But it's not very effective. Now I can't say if this is an actual thing. I use the scout plane to find ships behind islands, and then my ship can see them and target them. And so then you can drop shells on them. Easy 100k. So your guns are very good penetration within 7 kilometers. Outside of 7 kilometers, you've got to rely on your DPM and accuracy. Easy 200k plus a bonus 15. I only bought IJN Myoko because I did not own a premium cruiser and I thought I would really like them. I don't know if it's worth it, but I was able to finish Japan with her and I made a buttload of silver lions. So if you do have the money, maybe it is worth it, but I would never condone you buy packs just to finish a naval line. They do take some practice and they do require some knowledge of the doctrine. I hope you've enjoyed this video. It took a lot of work, so please give me that like and subscribe if you haven't already. Until next time, Commander Tyrael, out.